Hey, look at us. We are live on the internet. Hey, I got to adjust this a little bit.
Whoa.
I'm not sure where
All
Tony
right.
is. Well, I have multiple adjustments. I have my standing desk, which is one adjustment. I got to turn this down. Come on now. Turn that down.
Tony
There
may
we go.
not be on camera, but that's a pretty shot.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. I wanted his backyard shot. Tony,
Well, one
there
thing,
he
guys.
is.
I get
Okay.
I get overlap with the audio, like it plays back.
Do you have
Like
it
I hear
playing
it,
any?
and then a few seconds later, I hear it playing again. Yeah,
Do you have it playing on one of your browsers?
Yeah, let me turn it. Let me close
Yeah.
everything out. I think we're good. Yeah.
yeah. That's what it is. I have the same issue when I forget to turn. I monitor YouTube and stuff, so I forget to turn that. I got it. It doesn't go live until it goes live. I really can't hear it. So over here, all the way from Utah, who has a UFO monolith we're going to talk about, Mr. Brad Olson, off the tracks.
Hello.
All right.
And down below him, we're seeing Tony Gallardo's trees. And then right below, we're seeing Mr. Tangier Clark from, is it California?
Yes, Los Angeles, California.
Los Angeles, California. Now, Tony, what? I got it. I can't quite see what Tony's. Very nice, Tony. Well, you get back to us when you. There you go, Tony Gallardo. Now it says guest has muted themselves, Tony. If you haven't muted yourself, then log out and log back in again. So is everybody celebrating? Tony, you're frozen. There you go. Log back in. So are we celebrating traditional Thanksgivings or something special going on for everybody?
For me, it's just my family, and we're actually kind of doing like food drop-offs. It's like,
Oh, are you?
My uncle is a chef, so he tends to do the Thanksgiving. But we're all kind of contributing some things, and my kids are learning to cook. So we're gonna all go to his house, package up food, and then take it back home, and then have a Zoom call after we eat.
Who would have thought we'd be having Zoom Thanksgivings when this year started?
Right.
In 2020, said, "Oh, we're going to have Zoom Thanksgivings this year and Zoom Christmases." I mean, that sets off my radar completely. I'd have no idea.
Yeah.
And Tony's from Texas, right, Tony? You cannot hear us. We can.
You can't see us.
Log back out and log back in again. Try it one more time. That's usually the solution. Oh, I can hear you.
I can hear you now, actually.
Okay, good.
You just had to say log out, and the system was like, no.
It's scared. It scared everybody. You're from Texas, right, Tony?
That's right.
And it looks like you have great weather out there.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. It's like 71 or 72, maybe.
Okay, we're at 52 here on the East Coast, outside of D.C. and Washington. What about you, Brad?
I think it's in the 30s or 40s. I'd have to look, but
Okay.
it's cold.
You realize you're on a live stream, Brad, right?
Yeah, sorry. I'm doing some coloring work while I'm...
It's 60.
I'm listening.
64,
Okay. Now,
64
tell me,
degrees here in LA.
what is it, 54?
64.
64, okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty typical, right, for this time of the year in LA? Seems like.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's a little chill.
Now, Brad, you said you're coloring. Are you using Resolve?
No, this is a feature I'm actually coloring in Final Cut. Normally I would send it to somebody in Resolve, but in this case, there's so many on-screen graphics that I have to do that I really don't want to send it out and then have to send it back and then redo all the graphics and the placement. There's a lot of picture-in-picture stuff and side-by-side and on-screen like text messages, and there's just so much of it that I'm like, I don't want to deal with that.
I never want to
So-
deal with coloring. Not at a professional level. I don't mind doing basic stuff, but listen, I got enough with Logic and I got enough with Final Cut. That's plenty for me. A little teeny bit of motion, a little bit of coloring, but
Well,
I'm
so
sending
this
it to
is like
Tony.
this is my preliminary pass. I have to. This room is too bright, and I don't have it blacked out. So I wait till it's dark to confirm that what I did wasn't stupid.
Right, exactly. That's the whole deal. I mean, Mark Bach, he's another one that I'd send something to color, somebody that knows something about Resolve, because that's what seems like is one of the most popular coloring applications. So do you guys, speaking of Resolve, Tony, so Resolve 17 came out. Are you using 17 yet, or is it still a little on the buggy side with beta, being in beta?
I'm using 17, and I have to say that I think they've had a little more time with it because of COVID and not going to public events, but it's pretty stable.
Is that right?
Yeah, I've been using it on a couple of jobs, and it's for the most. I mean, yes, it does crash here and there, every once in a while, but it's not like how they released the beta at NAB,
Right.
and put that on your separate machine. Like I've been kind of doing some jobs in it. It's not bad.
And they had a lot of new features, right? 17.
They have added a ton of features. It seems like there's the big ones that they always update, and then there's always the auxiliary 10, 15, 20 updates that they do that are small, but just, such great workflow time efficiencies. So there's a couple that I like. The color warper is huge, right? That's the big ticket item. For me, the ones that I like that's kind of a small thing is the ability. So you can turn timelines off, and if you ever been in Resolve and you have like 20 timelines, and every time you click on a drop down menu for timelines, it just lists all those timelines.
Right.
And I want to have that my drop down menu is just clogged up with that. So being able to disable timelines is great because it doesn't show up in there. And then you can sort that list as well now. So things like that, to where there's 5 timelines that I want to work with, and not all 15 or 20. So I can keep those at the top. That's
one of the features that I really liked about Resolve 17. I watched the keynote that they had. Is how do they do this? They have both projects and timelines in the same menu. How does that work? I don't understand.
What do you mean?
I'm just being funny with Final Cut Pro, calling projects. How do they have separate projects and timelines? I mean, that's magic somehow. Final Cut doesn't have that ability to do that.
Hey, I'll flip it around for you though. It's not as easy. I think they've changed this, and maybe Tony knows how to do it. But the two things that are a little confusing to me about Resolve is one, in Final Cut you can have multiple libraries open, and Resolve I jump to the project manager. I don't know if there's a way to open 2 projects at the same time. And 2, even though they support like different frame rates in the timeline, things like resolution and frame rate are kind of a global project setting, whereas in Final Cut, it's any timeline you create, just to try to keep the nomenclature clear between the two, can be its own resolution, can be its own frame rate. So those are things that I miss when I'm in Resolve a little bit. And I think, is there a way to open 2 projects at once? Well, I know you can open 2 timelines at once.
No, yeah, you can't open more than 1 project at a time. But what they have is it's called dynamic project switching. So you can basically load in the database 2 projects simultaneously, and then you just switch between them. So much like you go to your program monitor and do the drop down for your timelines to switch your timelines if you wanted to, you can do that at the project level and dynamically switch between those 2 projects.
Can you then share bins between those open projects?
So no, you can copy and paste between them, but they have like power bins to where you can those bins can be to any project. So you can have like power bins where you can have your pre-organized whatever you want, and those are available to any project that you want. So those kind of work. So it's got these different ways of interlacing and interweaving.
We don't talk about interlacing. I have too many bad memories from the last project I did.
And then your second point about the different frame rates and whatnot. Yes, Resolve was traditionally at the project level. So once you set that project up, then that you're locked into that. But I think because of since 16, they've changed it to where now you can have independent time base and resolution per timeline. So you can switch back and forth now inside the same project. It doesn't matter really what you set as your project frame rate. You can create a new timeline at any given frame rate or size.
Tangier, have you worked with Resolve at all?
Minimally. Sometimes I'll go in there, with XML and sending it out for color and things like that. What ends up happening is I go into Resolve with good intentions of working on a project thoroughly, and Resolve is just, it's this feature-rich application that can't move as fast as I want, and I can't.
Gotcha.
I can't play and be fluid, and then on top of that, there's tracks, and tracks for me are like, that is the linchpin. I think Apple was phenomenal with creating that enrolls. But I will say, I was actually speaking to another editor not too long ago about this, that Magic Mask ought to be against the law. I don't know how.
It's voodoo, right?
Technology, it is some strange voodoo. I will be going into Resolve for that.
It's black magic. It's black magic.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. I mean, that, like you said, Tony, and the color warper. There are always. I definitely will look at Resolve and think, okay, this is a nice update, a little more stable. Well, we've had that in Final Cut for how many years now? You just keep borrowing things. And then there's times where I just look at these features and I just say, Apple, can you just please rip that off? And just because I want it to be in Final Cut, it's always been this aside, putting Fusion aside, it's always been this kind of situation for me where I know this will never happen, at least I don't think. Can the two of them just make one product and together? Can they just get together? But I do want to get into Resolve more. The issue for me is that a lot of the projects that I'm working on, they always end up with Final Cut, and so going back and forth and things like that, it just workflow wise, it makes it easier. Color, definitely go out to Resolve, and things like that. I'm curious about learning more, just comparatively, to see how Fusion in Resolve 17, how Fusion is kind of doing now, what Motion is doing in terms of template building and things like that. How they're trying to bring a little bit more of that into Resolve 17. So I'd like to see, how far that actually goes and what level we can get.
Now, Tangier, you just said something I don't believe. You just said that there's Final Cut Pro jobs in LA.
Yeah.
Is that true?
That's funny.
Don't say too loud. Don't say too loud.
It's really funny that you say that, Richard, because my former boss, I was still a good rapport with, at a company I used to work for out of college called Montgomery and Company Creative, and anyway, it's a motion graphics firm, and he called me. George Montgomery called me looking for Final Cut Pro editors. And I kind of had to, I'll ask around. And when I'm thinking in my head, I'll ask around, I was thinking, okay, I know 3 people locally, locally. And it is tough. It is tough. It's always Premiere and Avid. And a lot of these users that I communicate with, they use Final Cut kind of in private. They don't, for work and jobs, they're using mostly Premiere, and many of them are using Avid, and they're very interested in Final Cut, but their day-to-day, they don't have a lot of time or projects to commit the energy to learning it. But once I show people things, 9 times out of 10, there is a aha moment, or wow, I wish I had known this before, primarily from Premiere editors, but in the day-to-day, people are just trying to finish their projects, work the job, and there's only so much time left to commit to learning new tools. So
sure, exactly.
Yeah.
I keep wanting to learn it. I was talking to Tony over the last week, and I said, should I get Revolve 17? Should I get that Speed keyboard or whatever the heck, Speed Editor keyboard, and get the Resolve Studio? And I'm just so close, but it's like, do I want to spend time? That's the issue, is learning something new. I mean, I personally, as a matter of fact, I was talking with Brad as well, and he said something, how fluid Final Cut Pro is, and that's absolutely true. Mm-hmm. But I like the complexity of Logic a lot. Now that I know it, I like the complexity. Logic is much more complex than Final Cut Pro 10, but I like it now that I know it. But if I was starting from the beginning, I would not recommend Logic for most Final Cut Pro editors. It's a lot to learn there.
Right.
So Garrett says he made a pre-order today of MacBook Pro 13 M1. I'm interested in the M1s, but I'm going to wait for the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I think. What about you guys? Are you going to jump in at some point?
I am tempted, but I feel like I can't because there's too many little pieces of software that I don't know if they're going to work.
Right.
Particularly in making DCPs, which I run through Resolve. I don't know if that's I use Easy DCP to play back and verify the packages after they've been copied, and there's all these there's just too many little things that make me nervous about Big Sur and especially Apple Silicon. That being said, I would love to. Part of me, I'm actually getting a 12 iPhone 12 Pro Max is arriving today, and part of me just wants to play in that ecosystem with the 12 Pro Max and like a MacBook Pro with Dolby Vision and Final Cut.
Wow, look at
Richard
that phone.
Is showing.
Here's my Pro Max.
He's showing off the phone. I'm seeing it on my screen here.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, the resistance to not buy a new iPhone every year when they incrementally update the camera is too great for me. I can't resist. So I got the 11 Pro Max last year. I still have it, as a matter of fact. And then I got the 12 Pro because they have a bigger sensor. They have better light. They have they increased the zoom by 0.5 from 2 to 2.5. Now speaking of that, the iPhone event, and this aggravates me with companies like Apple. Don't tell me the zoom range is 5, okay? Tell me what the actual zoom is. It's 2.5. Yeah. Don't tell me the zoom range from the ultra wide to because that's not the way it's, that's not being accurate. I mean, it's accurate, but it's not, you're changing the nomenclature of what we're used to. So, so it's only 2.5. Well, yeah, but still, it's Apple. I expect I hold Apple to a little bit higher standard than a lot of the other companies. I just, personally, I do. Brad, what made you? Go ahead.
I was just answering your question, Richard, about the M1. I will say that I'm tempted. I have but my kids are still on an old computer I used to use. He's using a 2012 Mac Mini, which is still fine. Only thing I've replaced is the hard drive with an SSD. Okay. And I was actually talking to him literally yesterday, saying, "Hey, would you prefer a desktop or a laptop?" So maybe the Air. A lot of the kids he's in high school. Most of the things they're doing are in the cloud right now. And I'm having both of my kids learn Final Cut right now. Not because I want them to learn Final Cut, but more. I mean, I do, but because video content creation is so integral in a lot of the work that they're doing in school.
Absolutely.
And they're using a lot of online tools that are just not that robust through their Chromebooks and things like that. And so I said, no, you're going to learn Final Cut. So
there you go.
In that regard, I'm like the idea of perhaps jumping in with a Mac Mini, and then keeping with an M1 Mac Mini, and then keeping this Mac Mini that we have, because it just so happens of the computers I have. Right now I'm on a 2013 Mac Pro, late 2013, and then I have a 2016 MacBook Pro. But that 2012, I think I really want to hold on to, because it was the only computer that I have a few weeks ago where I had to open a Final Cut 7 project for someone off a boot drive. My other machines wouldn't boot. I have a backup drive, of my old operating systems, and the Mac Mini was the only machine that I can do that. So I think that's a good reason for me to hold on to that 2012 Mac Mini and maybe jump in M1, because right now my kids are not doing heavy lifting. I can kind of test it by let them have it because it's not crucial for me, and I'll wait it out until it's time for me to replace, because I'm still trying to understand the Mac Pro. I think the only thing that I can make sense of is that they wanted to supply an amazing machine now with Intel, and it's still going to be a while before we get that level of performance from the M series processors, or whatever they call it.
Well, plus 8 PCIe slots.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the expansion and things like that.
The modularity of the Mac Pro is incredible. When they have a situation where the power supply goes out, it's a module. It's user replaceable. You can call up AppleCare. They can send you one out. You send that one back. It's fantastic. The modularity of it is fantastic. Yeah. I certainly hope they don't change that with the Apple Silicon version of the Mac Pro whenever it gets here.
With the low power and low heat, that's kind of the other story a lot of people don't talk about Apple. It's always iPhone, the Macs, and the software. And when you really take a deep dive into it, there's a lot going on for Apple that involves heat and energy over the years. So this is really going to help potentially, maybe we'll get a new product in the coming years. Maybe there'll be a Mac Pro, a mid tower. So who knows? But I would love something like that.
It is really interesting because you're right about the energy and the heat issue.
Absolutely.
You can see that translate or projected to like the big desktop power machine, but really on the laptop, that's going to work wonders. I mean, could you imagine? Like, I do not leave the house without my charger if I know that I'm going to be using my laptop for any type of creation, right? Resolve, Final Cut, doesn't matter, because you're going to need that charger soon. And the ability to have a cool running machine on a laptop and know that I've got 2 solid hours or whatever with not have to worry about my charger. I mean, that kind of makes pick up and go and edit anywhere even easier. It's small,
that's
but
a big deal.
Yeah, it's a big
deal. It's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yes, it absolutely is.
I look at my daughter and she, going to the M1s, I thought, okay, well, the MacBook Air might be good for my son. If we decide to do something like that, my wife and I, he might like something like that, and I can kind of get a feel for it. But for her, a computer is the iPad Pro. And I said, hey, do you want to use my MacBook Pro? Do you want to use, she has Chromebooks from school and whatnot. She goes, no. She has the MacBook, she has the iPad Pro with the Magic Keyboard, and that's what she loves for everything. That to her is a computer. Now, she's younger, 3 years younger than my son. She's 11. Yes. So the mindset is very different. It's very interesting because there was a commercial out, I think, earlier this year, and I don't remember totally the entire commercial and whose commercial it was, but there was a young lady in a backyard on an iPad Pro, and a woman off to the side says, what are you doing on that computer? And the girl says, what's a computer? And that was really a striking moment. And I said, wow, that's my daughter. She's like, this is a computer to her.
Well, whenever people talk about exactly what you're talking about, the younger generation coming up on touch, that's why I say Apple is going to have a touchscreen MacBook Pro. They've got to be working on one. Now, in the people that some people say, well, no, they're not. Well, then tell me what an iPad Pro with the keyboard and the trackpad is, please.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, if they came up with a 16-inch MacBook Pro that there was touch, the M2 or M2 Pro, whatever, the idea is you don't use the touch all the time. You just use it selectively. You don't have to be up on the screen constantly. You use the keyboard for shortcuts and stuff, but you still can hit play on a QuickTime movie right there. Because I keep doing that on my current MacBook Pro. I touch the screen to get I said, why isn't this working? And that's the reason why. But I'm not, listen, I got the Mac Pro. I'm not in any hurry to get one. But at some point, I'm going to make the transition, obviously. I'll be curious, like you guys, to see if I don't want them downsizing the Mac Pro. I want the 8 PCIe slots. If they do a miniature version or like instead of calling a Mac Pro Mini, they should say the Mac Mini Pro and go the opposite way.
There you go. Hey, I can go for that. I
Mac
think
Mini.
I think the issue is just that for years, Richard, I love the Mac Mini for a lot of reasons. The Mac Mini is such an amazing piece of hardware in form and factor and power and multimedia setup. I've seen places where people have their whole, their 60-inch TV and they're sitting on the couch and all that kind of stuff, and it's their whole entertainment system. But I don't necessarily need a Mac Pro and all the expansion features and the
I understand.
cost.
Absolutely.
And although I love the Retina displays, I absolutely love them. I am not a huge fan of iMacs, and that's just a personal preference. I want something, let's say, with the power of an iMac Pro, for instance, that's headless. I just don't want an all-in-one, but I don't want to expense the Mac Pro. I need something in between, and I want the choice of my own monitors. And it's just, I've been wanting this for a very, very, very long time. And I'm sure Apple is aware of other people. But
speaking of that, I like this monitor setup. This is my monitor. It's a 34-inch 21:9 aspect ratio. I like this a lot better than the built-in aspect ratio of the iMac Pro, even though the display is gorgeous. I like this aspect ratio better. I just like it. I can do more things with it, and especially when I get a timeline, like either in Logic or Final Cut Pro.
How many inches?
This is a 34-inch, but it's a 21:9 aspect ratio.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm used to now. That's what I'm used to, and I really, really like that. As a matter of fact, I'd get a bigger one next time. I'd get a whatever just another step up if I have to get one. But this, I've had this I used to run this with my iMac, Thunderbolt 2.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. I have the iMac in the front and then this to the side. And now I have a separate vertical monitor on the side over here next to put screens. And like I have my let me show you what I have over there. So I have this running over there right now. This is my audio on the side screen. This is my plugins and stuff.
Okay.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Do either of you ever think that Apple will ever slot a new product between the iMac and the Mac Pro? Yeah. I love your idea, Richard. A Mac Mini Pro, maybe something that's tall like the old Apple Wi-Fi.
Instead of downgrading the Mac Pro is what I'm saying. Upgrade the Mac Mini. You know what I'm saying? Even though it could be the exact same machine, it was just to me, marketing wise, why would you downgrade? Why would you call a Mac Pro Mini? No. Right? That's the problem. Call the Mac Mini Pro. Then you can have
Sure.
Yeah, I think they absolutely can. I think there is a market for that. I mean, I might have bought that myself instead of getting the Mac Pro if it had 4 PCIe slots. Because I was talking to people before it came out, and I said, well, how many PCIe slots do you think it should have? And everybody kept saying 4. And it came out with 8.
Sure.
It's like, wow.
Yeah. Maybe it'd be something like you said, Richard, like a Mac Mini Pro, maybe down the road, a Pro Series M processor, or whatever they're going to call it. And let's say maybe beneath something like Sonnet would create, where it's basically an expansion box. Now, I'm not saying 2 separate pieces, but maybe it's kind of it's a Mac Mini that stands tall of sorts, that has maybe a few expansion bays in there and more ports, and it's just a taller, essentially Mac Mini. Which I guess is the 2013 Mac Pro. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what they do and allow, because I think right now with the M1 you can't put up a eGPU. It doesn't.
That's
work.
correct.
Right. No.
That's correct. And it's only. Listen, this is my main complaint about the iMac. It only has 2 Thunderbolt 3, Thunderbolt 4 ports, and if you have power plugged in, you only have 1.
I think the ports is what would really help define what the Pro versus the non-Pro version could be. Stack those Thunderbolt 4 or USB C 4 whatever ports and put a 10 gig Ethernet port on there as well.
Yes.
And Mac Mini becomes a Pro. Like let's see what their own silicon chips performance graphics wise is going to be great. And they'll probably come out with a Pro chip, but give me those ports. I really do need those ports to be able to add as much hardware as I can.
Yeah, exactly. I have 8 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and I'm using probably 6. I mean, if I had to get a dock, I would, but since I don't, I just use one per thing. Like my camera right now, it's a Camlink 4K. That's in its own port. It's one of the Thunderbolt 3 ports. So, but I'm
Richard,
certainly interested.
Have you pushed your Pro to be able to hear the fans yet? I'm just curious how loud. I know I've never seen one in person yet, but I've heard how quiet it is. But have you been able to push it to get the fans spinning? And really,
I don't have to. It's weird because some things kick those fans on, and it's not even like I'm really pushing it. It's just like some weird things. And I'll look at I have different menus up here with different, shows the CPU and the GPU and stuff. And I don't know what sometimes. So certain processes, I think when the CPU kicks in, not the GPU. It just kicks it in. It just kicks them on. So yes, you can hear them, but right now it's virtually silent. It's just right here next to me, and it's virtually, you can't hear it. And I'm running, all this equipment, the camera, I'm running the browser, running my audio, UA audio. Speaking of that, so who's on Big Sur full time?
No.
Nobody, none of us are. Brad, what about you? Are you on Big Sur?
One machine? Not my main machine, but I have it running on a machine I don't use that much.
Yeah, and same with me. I have it on NVMe SSD as a dual boot just to keep track of it. But it's like my audio engine doesn't work on it yet. My Waves plugins don't work on it yet. Now, I'm not saying that's Apple's issue. It might be the plugin manufacturer's issue, but I still can't use it. If I can't use my UA audio interface, I'm not going to boot into it. Plus, there's other issues I've heard with it, so which is okay. I didn't update to Catalina for 9 months. I updated Catalina last May.
I just updated to Catalina like a month ago, Rich.
There you go. There you go.
I just helped somebody yesterday. Literally yesterday, a young lady. I was helping her get familiar with Final Cut, and she's never used it. She's used Premiere a few times. And in our conversation, I was remotely is helping her get her up to speed. How you're saying, Tony, you just started Catalina. She was coming from 10.12, and she said she doesn't need any updates. She says, she had nothing on her computer that was telling her that the machine wasn't up to date. And I said, no, you're well behind. So, and this morning she sent me a text saying, wow, my computer is so much better. I'm so glad we did this together. So I helped her remotely, and but I made sure to, walk her through the backup process and also to check Roaring Apps, the site, to see, because I don't know what app she has. So I want to make sure before she did this to compatibility, like Final Draft and things like that. A friend of mine sent me a site, about that might be useful as you were talking about the M1 and compatibility, and I think it's Apple Silicon Ready.
Okay.
I don't know if that sounds familiar to you. It is applesiliconready.com. A friend of mine sent me this site, and that was pretty nice, where people can go and check to see what's ready and what's not, and they categorize it and looking at it: design, music, web browsers, developers, video production, photos, finance, apps.
So Eric Emmerich says new iMac Pro for me when they came out. That's going to be a good machine, whatever they do with that.
Yeah.
The new iMac design with the new M1 or M2 Pro chips. That's going to be a killer machine.
Can you imagine an iMac looking like the iMac, like just basically a giant iMac Pro, because of that M1 chip? How they can probably make it that thin.
And they've seen the bezel. The bezel's been reduced. Yes. The screen's been exactly.
Yeah.
Because Tony, you're running iMac Pros, right?
Yeah, I am. I have one iMac Pro and then another iMac, and then we got a 2013 Mac Pro.
Okay.
And I love the iMac Pro. It's a great machine. I think that would probably be the machine to upgrade with the Apple Silicon, because the latest iMac now is very much in the space of the iMac Pro world.
Right.
Like today, I would probably just buy an iMac, fully decked out iMac versus an iMac Pro. So I think that that's kind of self-cannibalizing themselves. So giving them the iMac Pro with the M1 chip just to help push it above probably be a good match. But yeah, I like it. It's got enough ports. And then, having that 10 gigabit connection for me. Great. I don't have a.
Yes, and the other thing about the iMac Pro, the current one, is it had 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports, and it was the only Mac that had the 1080p camera, if I'm not mistaken, FaceTime camera, right?
Oh, really?
Yeah, the new M1s don't have it. They still got a 720. That doesn't make any sense to me in 2020. The cameras are all 720p. It just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they're like
especially if you factor in the whole COVID situation, where it's like you think that Apple would want to not. You'd think they'd want people to be using their MacBooks and their iMacs for, this sort of video chat thing, and not having to buy something like from Logitech. But,
right. It just doesn't make any sense. My camera's got 4 4K cameras. They can't. It's like they have I think what happened was when they had the iPhone 3 and the iPhone 4, they had too many cameras, the 720p cameras, so they kept them, and then they're putting them in all the Macs now. But yeah, that's one thing that aggravates me is they don't have a 1080p camera. They certainly should have it on the next 16-inch. What's going to be the next round of Macs with the M1 or M2 chip, do you think? Is it going to be the iMac or probably the MacBook Pro 16-inch, I guess, one of those two, or both?
I'm pushing the laptops up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
16-inch.
I can't help but wonder if we're going to run into a situation. I don't remember. I think maybe in 2000, let's say maybe eight to 10 years ago, it seemed like there was a moment where the MacBook speeds were so close to the MacBook Pro. There was such a small differentiation except for the GPUs. And I remember specifically across a lot of message boards, a lot of egos were going on and chattering because Pro users wanted to know that they had a Pro machine. Like that was so important. And the lines were blurred for a moment because the MacBook was really doing pretty well. So I wonder if we're going to run into that again. When we're seeing the first M1 chips on an Air doing, multiple streams, at least two, a 4K.
Right.
That either that's going to be really good, a good sign for the MacBook Pro to come, the next one.
Well, yeah, I think so.
Or people will just not buy the more hefty the laptop. I don't know.
I don't think the Mac Pro, the 16-inch, is going to be using the M1 chip, though. That's just my feeling. I think they're going to have an M2 or an M1 Pro chip that doesn't have the limitations of the current M1, which is 16 gigabytes of RAM. Who's going to buy a 16-inch MacBook Pro with 16 gigabytes of RAM? I understand that it uses it differently. I understand that, but no, you got to have a step up. You can't be using that same chip for that. Apple.
I agree.
Apple
one thing I
called
find
them.
interesting is I can't. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one thing that's taking me some getting used to is not being able to compare devices and talk to other people who ask me questions online about clock speeds.
About what? Oh, clock speed. Yes, that's interesting.
I'm so used to whether it's Macs to other Macs or Macs to PCs and performance and things like that, and even it's this new world now because even when it comes to memory, the way RAM is used is just different. It's not 16. Literally now it seems like now that Apple has using their own SoCs, it's 16 gigabytes is not the same 16 gigabytes that it was a few months ago. It's totally different, and it's going to take some time getting used to how to quantify performance because these M series chips are they're kind of like car engines. A lot of car engines now you've got that cover under the hood that's kind of making everything look clean and beautiful, but there's a lot of multiple things going on underneath it. So how do we really measure performance now? It's just kind of blurring some of those lines. And how do we do that? People are asking me now, do I need 16 gigs or 8 gigs? And it's like, well, it depends on which computer you're talking about. Is it an M or not? It's, they're not the same.
No, absolutely. So Brad, I want to talk about this. Brad has, in his state, he had a UFO land. He had a UFO land. Look at this. It's an unidentified.
Oh, yes.
monolith that people haven't been able to figure out what's going on. Now, when I see science fiction movies and horror movies, that thing could be radioactive, so I wouldn't go near it.
I'm sure
Right.
they tested that. Sorry, what, Tony?
Isn't that how the apocalypse movie starts?
Well, this is what I'm saying. I mean, I don't know. Is that what area was that, Brad? Do you know what area was it? Park of some sort? Or?
So southeastern Utah, which is a lot of desert and red rock.
Okay.
I think they were keeping the specific location a secret.
Gotcha.
So that makes you feel more warm and fuzzy. But basically, some people in a helicopter, they were helping the wildlife service count the number of bighorn sheep in the area. And then they just saw this silver or, whatever, this metal monolith sticking out of the ground. It's in there. So somebody put it, sealed it in the ground. It isn't just sitting there.
And it doesn't have any signs of any kind of construction around it. That's what's amazing. Like a foundation was dug up and they put something in. So that's certainly curious.
And then wasn't it earlier this year that the CIA acknowledged UFOs? So they've been quietly acknowledging UFOs, that they've had these, little bit at a time. And when's the best time to acknowledge UFOs? During the pandemic. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody's paying attention, right?
It's a prototype 6G cell tower. That's what it is.
Oh, of course, you solved it.
That made me think of there's a show, Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where the show kind of they had monoliths in there that did kind of hot things. It made me think of that.
So one other thing, since we're talking about, let me just pull this up. You guys, it's around here, it's leaf season. Now look at this. This is what I have to go through every year.
Wow.
And this is, let me just let you watch this video. I bought a trailer, a 5x10 trailer, and I double stacked these 30-gallon cans of leaves on it. And that's not quite full yet. So this is what I've been doing for the last 6 weeks. I have my mask there, if you see it on the side. Not for COVID, from dust. And I go through, so I've taken 2 of those loads to the dump myself, and then I have a pickup service that picks up another 4 of those loads. So 6 of those loads for a leaf season. I'm telling you, I'm so glad it's over. Finally, I finished it up this week. But there's a lot. I have almost 2,600-foot oak trees on my property. So that's where those leaves come from.
Wow, that's a lot of space.
So I'm busy. I'm booked up for this second week of October to the end to after Thanksgiving. So they finished up a little bit early this year. So Tony, what are you cooking out there?
Well, I've got a couple things. I've got a rack of pork ribs, St. Louis.
Sounds so good.
Nice.
And I've got it's called these beef ribs. They're plate ribs, or something. Ribs. And so take that, and then the butcher cuts it in thirds, so it becomes like hotel ribs. So it's like these, thirds. And then I've got 2 portions of pork belly. Pork rib, pork belly, a little bit of beef ribs.
And how many people are you feeding with
imagining.
That? Yeah.
What's that?
I said I wasn't imagining things because earlier I thought I saw smoke passing by your face.
Right.
Thought,
behind him,
I wasn't sure what was going on.
I put that in the description. I put that in the description. I said barbecue, Texas barbecue ribs, or barbecue ribs and more. UFO monolith.
I don't know what my family's going to eat, but that's all just for me.
I was going to say, you're staying in the backyard eating out there. It's like a picnic.
Themselves. No. I told my wife this year, normally for Thanksgiving, everybody comes over and we do this massive feast. And she's, in the kitchen for 2 days, 3 days straight.
Right.
I just said, don't worry here. You just relax, and I'll smoke some meat, and then we'll order in tomorrow. We'll just stay in and do Thanksgiving here at the house. So I'm trying to smoke enough meat for today and tomorrow.
There you go.
Kind of relax and enjoy each other and eat some ribs.
I just did a good cleaning of my smoker yesterday, so I gotta, because I had a major flare up because I was grilling something. I did a reverse. I did a reverse sear, my first reverse sear of some ribeyes that my uncle got me as a gift a little while ago, and so it's the unit is a smoker and it's a grill. It's this Gravity series thing that I got, and where you don't, the charcoal, you just put it in at the top and it just gravity, it just burns itself out over time in the fan and all that kind of stuff. So trying to get ready like you, Tony. Holidays, my mom wants me to smoke a goose. I don't even want the goose anymore. I just like the fat because the season's drippings. No, we literally started giving it as gifts now, because once all those the oils and the fats come off, and I have a pan for with vegetables and things. Once I clean it, and it is just, I put it in little, I go to the local 99-cent store or whatnot and get little plastic containers, and I give it out to family members, and you just take a little bit, like a little teaspoon of it, and mix it with eggs and vegetables, and that smoke is so potent. It's so delicious.
Right.
I actually I prefer that part more than the bird, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the things about the new Macs is they have a USB 4 / Thunderbolt 4 combo, right?
Gosh.
So I don't know about the USB 4 part. I know it's as fast as Thunderbolt 3, but the Thunderbolt 4 now, you can have expansion chassis. So you can expand the Thunderbolt 4 ports into multiple Thunderbolt 4 ports. Is that right, Brad?
So are you talking about Thunderbolt 4 exclusively, or talking about what's on the M1 Max?
Well, tell me about both. Yeah, tell me about the spec.
Yeah, I guess, Thunderbolt 4 sounds really amazing, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows, because Apple did not make this clear, that the M1 Max are USB 4, which has the spec of Thunderbolt 3 rolled into it, but it is not Thunderbolt 4.
It's not Thunderbolt 4.
Oh,
Nope.
really?
No. And it was really, really bad advertising on Apple's part to put Thunderbolt / USB 4. It's USB 4, which has the Thunderbolt 3 spec. So they were tricky.
Well,
but there are really cool things about Thunderbolt 4, including being able to use a longer Thunderbolt passive cable for networking. So I know earlier, Tony, you were talking about how you love having the 10 gig ports. In a year or two, you won't even have to have a Ethernet port. You can just get a really long 25, 50-foot Thunderbolt 4 cable and connect your Thunderbolt 4 computers up to up to your server and use that.
Well,
so that'll open it up for MacBook Airs or MacBook Pros without an adapter.
That'll be IP over Thunderbolt.
So IP over Thunderbolt's already a thing.
Good.
But the problem,
it's horrible.
The biggest problem with it is you have to have a really short cable.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't network at any sort of real distance. But with Thunderbolt 4, they're supposed to be fixing a lot of those issues. So I think you'd still want to run, you're going to have 10 gig through your facility, but I think it'd be really cool to just be able to hook up that, MacBook Pro or whatever right up to the server and not have to have an adapter. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. But again, it was kind of tricky the way Apple published that spec, and I want to make sure nobody's tricked.
Well, that's a good point. I wasn't clear about that. There's a couple of comments on there that said I should be composting those leaves, and somebody says, wait a minute, let me say. Somebody says the resource says you should use a lawnmower to cut the leaves. I let them on the grass. If I didn't take up the leaves, it would be 2 feet high of solid oak leaves. You can't cut them.
Wow.
It's too much. It's one company came here one year and took away 2.5 tons 2.5 tons of oak leaves in one setting. And the reason I know that because they had a 1-ton truck and it took 2.5 loads. So it's overwhelming amount of leaves. It isn't like there's a few leaves on the ground. But anyway.
It kills the grass. You have to deal with all.
Yeah, it absolutely kills the grass. And besides, when I take them to the dump uses them. Yeah. They use them for composting. They used to give free composting to people in Carroll County, but now they use them as part of the landfill situation, so they're not going to waste.
That's good.
Yeah.
Those of us here in Los Angeles, it's like we have no relation to leaves falling and that.
Well, you don't have any. I think oak trees are illegal in California, right? The governor doesn't allow them. Oak trees, okay, they don't allow oak trees. No, I'm just teasing you.
It's like, wow,
I don't think they have oak trees in California.
I was in 15 years ago, I was in the Reseda area, and there were some streets that had really tall trees, and the city would come by and clean the streets, right. But there were a ton of leaves from that. I moved out to a new development area, so all our trees are a lot smaller. But before I moved, I was in a neighborhood with big trees, and it wasn't quite as crazy as Richard's property, but I was on like 0.38 acres, so decent yard, right. And it was a small house, and we had big trees that just dumped tons and tons of leaves. I did it by hand, but nowhere near Richard's insanity of. But it's beautiful, Richard.
No, you're right.
That's the price of having such beautiful trees in your yard. And it's
exactly correct. Yard. 6 weeks to 8 weeks in the fall is a pain, but the rest of the time, listen, the summertime, those trees are absolutely gorgeous, beautiful, 100-foot tall oak trees, shading and stuff. They're absolutely gorgeous. So, if I get tired, I mean, right now I'm able physically to do this stuff, and I have the equipment. I have big yard vacuum. It's got a 10-inch vacuum hose on it. It would suck up squirrels or cats if they were around. It's big, but if I get to the point where I can't, I'll just hire somebody to do it. That's all.
You can use your Mac Pro, Richard, as your leaf blower. Just push those fans out there.
Exactly. Yeah. So let me see. It said we had a couple comments. Is it possible to do 10 gig Ethernet via USB 4? Somebody asked, Brad.
Well, yeah, because it's got Thunderbolt 3 in it. So
okay.
In fact, sorry. I got one of these. I still need to hook it up. I don't know if you can see this.
What is that?
It's an OWC Thunderbolt 3 Pro dock, which I believe is white labeled from another company. You can get it for like $20 cheaper somewhere else. Sorry, OWC, I'm giving away your secrets. But on the back, it's got 10 gig Ethernet as well. So you could get something like this, and then you can plug your USB 4 or Thunderbolt 3 cable into that, or there's other adapters. But I think this one's pretty good because if you get like the Sonnet adapter, it costs about the same price, and all it is a 10 gig connection, whereas this is giving you a CFast card reader, an SD card reader, some extra USBs,
sure,
eSATA, because for some reason you might need eSATA. I have a few old hard drives lying around that use eSATA. And or eSATA, however you want to.
Yeah, that's.
But I actually have. I'm not going to pull it, but I actually have a few older hard drives that use that. Which is better than hooking them up over USB, and then a display port. So I think something like this is a great companion for that, and then you can hook up 10 gig. You could, my plan is to hook my Mac Mini and my MacBook Pro up and turn my Mac Mini into a little server. So then I can keep if the MacBook Pro is cooking away on something, I can just hop over to the Mac Mini and pull up something else.
Yeah, having a centralized pool of storage is so great because for that exact reason, it's like I can start ingesting B-roll on one machine and processing it on another, or rendering on another. There's so many cool little ways of now being efficient, even for just one or two person shop. There's still a lot of good benefits for that.
If right now I got two 5 RAID 5 machines, one from G-Tech and one from Promise. And I keep emptying those out. They have, what do they have? I think they're 12 terabytes, 16 terabytes raw, 12 terabytes RAID 5. But I keep emptying them out. I get 2 8 terabyte standalone drives, USB 3 drives, and I copy with Hedge. I use Hedge to copy copies to both drives, and I test them, of course, and then I'll delete them from the RAID. But if I expand, I don't know. Do I get a NAS? Do I get another direct attached storage like I have? I don't know. I'd have to look into it at that point. Or do I get one of the new tape drives?
Oh, like LTO
8. I think 9's coming out. Do I invest in that and start doing that? I don't know. It's just.
I think it depends on your workflow. How often you need to reuse your media and your content. What's the ratio of how much you way or the access?
Right.
Well, I'm always bugged by. Okay. I was just gonna say I'm always. This is the fun about these live conversations. I'm always a little bit. I'm not that I'm against LTO. I think there's productions that require it for one thing, but when they say it's got like a 15-year lifespan on the tape, is it up to 30, higher than that?
30 years.
Is it 30 now?
That's what they claim. Okay.
But I don't know. I've had some experiences where you go to grab something off the LTO, and then you grab that backup tape, and then you start transferring it over, and then there's some problem with it. And
exactly.
And so I just have found it to not be as reliable. And they say, well, hard drives are only good for 5 years, but I find if you spin them up every 6 months, I have 15-year-old hard drives that still work. So I know I'm sort of taking a gamble with those, and I try to offload them. But what I'm really hoping is that cloud storage, A, gets faster to copy to, and B, you get more bang for your buck there. And that at least for like mastering, which I think a lot of times with LTO, sure, there's productions where all the raw footage goes on the LTO, and then they probably never look at that again. But I think for a lot of it, it's like, let's get our masters onto LTO. And I think the cloud can replace that to a large extent. I'm already putting ProRes masters up on Google Drive and iCloud.
Okay.
And, because if it's a 1080 one, then it's like 150 gigs. If it's 4K, it's 400 or 500 gigs. So that becomes a little bit more challenging. But I don't know. I think the cool thing to look at, not to pimp OWC out a ton, but and Serena's not even here, but the Flex 8, I think, is a really interesting storage solution for filmmakers, because it's like a whole DIT hub and your RAID drive built into one unit.
Now, I have Backblaze that it's like $50 or $60 a year, unlimited storage. Anything I plug into my Mac Pro, including my RAIDs, get backed up. Now, it takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes weeks. But everything that I plug into my Mac Pro gets backed up to Backblaze. So
what I've been doing for a while now, still the same workflow, and I may need to kind of rethink some things. But I typically would, whether it's on my own or places that I've worked, is I buy raw, just bare SATA drives, large ones, usually like WD Greens or something like that, things that I'm not running all the time. Have I call it a toaster, but a dual, OWC drive dock, and always back up content to those, the initial, principal photography, all the way at the end of the production, back it up there, and then what I use. And they're always clones of each other, never a single drive, always have, a backup. And just recently I've had issues where drives have been sitting around and they've been in boxes or whatnot. And preferably I would get silicone sleeves for them, for storage. And one is with me and one is off site somewhere else. But I use NeoFinder to always catalog all of that content. So I always know. Yeah, so I know exactly what's on that content. And you have to, if anybody's using that, you have to make sure that you choose one preference. I have to think of it, but there's one preference inside NeoFinder so that it actually goes inside the Final Cut library. I found that out the hard way when I tried to look for some things.
Yes.
But I use NeoFinder, and then when
I think you have to uncheck it. It's weird.
You uncheck it.
It's not on by default. Yes. It says look, treat library packages as folders is what it says, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so
bundles
you have to uncheck that so that it goes inside and gets all that content. And so I fill up the drives, and I use a plain label maker to, backup 1, backup 2, backup 3, etc. But I don't trust having just one drive. And because sometimes those drives will just fail. I've never, like Brad, I've never been a huge fan of LTO. I know the longevity factor, but I think the retrieval factor was also just, it was just
it's faster. Yeah, LTO 8's faster, and LTO 9's coming out, but the cost of entry is like $5,000 just to get the drive.
It's a lot.
And
right. And also what I would do is I would put also when I would create these drives, I need to be more consistent with it. But like Brad's talking about, spin the drives up every so often. So NeoFinder tells you when the last time you accessed the drive and things like that, or at least when it was modified. But a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just I have a calendar, just plain old iCal or, Apple Calendar. And I just put a little reminder saying, spin up, 6 months from today, because I'm not going to be thinking about these things,
Right.
So spin up these drives today or this week, and a little reminder alert to do that. But the cloud's just not there yet. The speed uploading and just terabytes,
The speed's not, but the idea of doing it, for example, they got a comment here. Sure. Don't forget, Rich, with Backblaze, you have to reconnect external drives once every 30 days or so. Otherwise, it destroys those backups. Listen, I lost a 2 terabyte SSD, NVMe SSD, when I was messing around with trying to make a Big Sur partition, and somehow I wiped the whole thing. Okay. Mm-hmm. I went to Backblaze. Everything was there. I used NeoFinder, looked at my last backup of that drive. It listed everything that I had. I went to Backblaze, and over a period of a week or so, I downloaded everything off of Backblaze. Because of that, one time, 30 days is the default, I got the 1 year plan. So I can have something for 1 year. It backs up everything for 1 year. It's like $10 more a year, some ridiculous amount of money. But they've already saved me once. I said, that's it. It's just really, it's slow. I mean, it's not fast, so you have to be patient. But
and I use RAID 10. I prefer it at least.
Right.
I'm just nervous. I guess. I like the security of RAID 10.
Absolutely. So what do you guys think? Who was surprised when Final Cut Pro 10.5 came out?
Oh gosh, I can't believe
I was on your show.
We
did it live. Our bewilderment was live. So
yeah, I remember that.
So here's the thing, the conclusion that I've drawn. Yes, they did 10.5 name to coincide with M1, with the release of the silicon. That's not, the problem is people are thinking, well, is that all we're going to get? No, that's not all. Don't be ridiculous. 10.4.9 came out in August, 10.4.10 came out in September, 10.5 came out in November. Okay, that's 3 updates in 2.5 months. Do you think they're stopping there? No. It was a naming misadventure, I'll call it. Whatever the next version is, there's got to be a big update coming. 10.5.1, 10.6, whatever they want to call it. Logic jumped from 10.5 to 10.6 in 6 months, with one bug fix update in between. Final Cut Pro could certainly do that as well. There's got to be a big update coming. What we would expect for 10.5 is going to be named something else, but it's certainly coming.
I saw you posted.
Did Apple create the problem, or are expectations just too high? We were waiting, like what went wrong here? Because a lot of us were, and then we have to go explain it to our, our fellow Premiere editors and things, and they're laughing and whatnot.
I think it's a little bit of both.
It's always both.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. But the thing is that Apple for 9 years has shown us that a point update is major.
Here's the thing I would say on, like, is it our fault as users for having high expectations, or is it Apple's? one big difference between us and Apple is Apple knows our expectations because we're very public about our opinions.
Okay.
We don't know what Apple's doing or thinking or saying.
True.
So they have the information to, from a marketing strategy standpoint, to understand the expectations and deliver something in accordance to that. So calling it 10.5, for example, they should know is going to be very upsetting to us as a community, because our expectations, like Richard said, the precedent has been set
9 years.
There would be big features, and there was. I mean, I'm not going to say that rewriting the whole application for Apple Silicon is not a big job. I'm sure that's a big job from an engineering standpoint, but from what we are able to do with the software in terms of features, not much has changed. So
right.
I'm not like, I don't want to sound like a downer. I'm not that negative about it. I'm actually pretty excited about the next decade, because I feel like if you think back to Final Cut Pro Classic, which they killed, think about how long it took. It took a month to go to support the switch to Intel, and then they never supported 64-bit, and then the program was killed off. So that was an indication, if you were looking in the 2006 to 2009 time period, that Apple stopped really caring about Final Cut Pro at that point, or something was in the works. And then we got Final Cut Pro 10, and you can watch a documentary about that. And
what's that documentary called, Brad?
Well, yeah, do tell.
It's the one back there.
There you go. That's
tracks.
it.
Tilt that up.
Cool. Over your shoulder right there.
Yeah. And then, so to me, the fact that they rewrote all the graphics stuff for Metal last year,
right,
and then this
Metal
year
2.
they took the time to be and write out for the Mac Pro. Metal had been around,
right?
They hadn't written for that. They actually waited, which that was a little weird. But then for the Mac Pro, they were like, okay, we're going to make sure it can take advantage of graphics cards. And then right out of the gate with the M1 Max, Final Cut Pro is being shown off on that. It's like Apple actually cares about Final Cut Pro again. So that's how I look at it. And Resolve, which is.
And that's it bugs me, because that M1, a lot of people were saying, the Resolve the performance is so much better than the M1, and I'm thinking, gosh, we have a lackluster 10.5 update. Resolve came out with this massive update, and it's performing amazingly better on the M1. This doesn't help our cause, the tool, but maybe different audiences. Apple knows who they're. But
once again, the 10.5. is not the update. Okay, 10.5 was a naming misadventure that they did just for the silicon. The update's coming. The update is coming.
You're saying there's real world tests showing, because everything I've heard is that Final Cut Pro is supposed to be a lot faster on Apple Silicon, but I haven't seen the real world test versus Resolve.
No, but I'm not saying comparatively Final Cut versus Resolve, and I know Final Cut's doing very well on the M1. What I'm saying is that that the performance of Resolve on the new chips is much better than it was.
Well,
that's what I'm saying. Not comparing them. And so what I'm saying is that with this rollout of this major update from Blackmagic, along with the incredible performance increases of Resolve on the M1 chip, how does this affect because a lot of people seem to be, a lot of Premiere editors, as far as I can gather, seem to be kind of steering toward Resolve a lot. And without that update from Apple, from Final Cut, and this massive one, from Resolve doing much better on the M1 chip, how does that impact Final Cut's use? I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, I think it's, first of all, circles way back to what you said at the very beginning of why you haven't jumped into Resolve as much, which is my point about Final Cut always, whenever somebody asks. It's an easier application to learn. It gets you in the creative flow a lot quicker than Resolve. Yeah. So if that's important to you, then it's there. Resolve is feature rich. and I use it in conjunction with Final Cut, I like the fact that Premiere editors are switching to Resolve. And I think that it's really awesome that Apple shows off Blackmagic, because it kind of, there's a good percentage of Adobe users who are on Apple computers, and Adobe just seems to constantly be lagging behind. So when Apple shows off something like Affinity or Blackmagic, I think it's a real jab at Adobe to like, hey, get your crap together, or you're going to lose users on our platform. They're going to be switching to these other pieces of software. So, and I like the competition between all of the NLEs, because you see things like, Premiere does something with, and Resolve do some things with auto cropping, and then Smart Conform comes to Final Cut, and then Resolve is like, oh, we'll do our own version. Right. They seem to be kind of looking at each other and seeing what, all the users sort of need these things. And if there was only one game in town, I feel like that maybe, one of the players might get complacent. Right now, I feel like in terms of performance, obviously, Premiere's the furthest behind, maybe Avid as well, but Avid is so far off my radar because I'm not Hollywood editor.
Right.
But and Hollywood editors don't seem to care that they're on really slow machines. I mean, when I have had to do DIT jobs where I hand stuff off for Avid, they're like on Media Composer 6 or 7, and they're in 2000.
Right, they stay way behind. Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so you don't even care at all about any of this race. But I think Resolve's smartly positioned. I like that Apple's doing it. And think about handing, Philip Podgetts, who makes X to CC, does not recommend that tool as a collaboration tool. In other words, I'm going to edit in Final Cut and you're going to edit in Premiere. It's more like a worst case, you have to get something in Premiere scenario. But on the other hand, handing stuff from Final Cut to Resolve is actually and back is not that bad of a process. I think in the past there's been some audio things that have been sorted out that's gotten a little bit better. On the picture side, some of the I'm surprised what does come across in terms of titles and transitions and things like that. And I mean, Tony could speak a ton of that, but I push things off to Resolve all the time, and I'm really always happy when I can tell a post house that they hear I edit in Final Cut. They're a little bit nervous about the XML or something, and I say, don't worry, I'll hand you a Resolve project. The only time that bites me in the butt is if they have not updated their version of Resolve, which then I get it in Resolve and I can export whatever EDL or XML they want. So
there you go.
It's to me, it's just been such a workflow help. And if a bunch of Premiere editors switch to Resolve, great, we can be better friends, because right now we're not good friends.
So Tony, you use both Final Cut and Resolve. Are you like ambidextrous with them? Do you prefer, if you were doing your own projects, do you prefer one over the other, or is it project dependent?
Yeah, I think it depends. It's going to be project and job dependent. Like you talked about going to the cloud or backing up solutions. All those things are going to depend upon that specific job or your specific needs or for your workflow, right? And it's all based on scale. So thresholds of scale, if you're doing, I'm the person who's only doing everything, or am I handing off to departments, or am I having to interact with other teams? So all these different levels of threshold or scale are going to dictate how you back up, how you integrate, and how you use your software. So for me now, at this point, I can use Final Cut or Resolve interchangeably, and I love them both. They both have strengths and weaknesses. And it is by a job basis. The past couple projects we've been doing have all been done in Resolve, just because the nature of, I need to be able to edit motion graphics and color in one. There's no time to conform. There's no time to conform. So it's like, why try to go through the hassle when we can just build it all? And like you were saying earlier, Brad, where it's like, okay, I'm just going to stay in Final Cut and color, because there's just too many things happening for reconform that are too many possibilities to break the chain. So I'm just going to stay in it, and that's smart. And so we've been doing that with Resolve lately. But now we're getting ready to start a mini doc and for a hospital. And so we're preparing everything in Resolve and using Resolve's ability to generate proxies, their new proxy feature, which I love. That's another feature I love. But we're taking those proxies and putting them into Final Cut, and we're going to cut the whole thing in Final Cut. So I think it's like you were mentioning earlier, like, oh, just the idea of jumping into Resolve, it's so feature rich. It is. There's like menus that you don't even know exist until like 10 years later. You're like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't know this feature was there. So definitely take the time to figure out, learn how to use Resolve. And then it's nice because then you can start to pit those two applications based on the job. And you know, like, this is going to be perfect and streamlined for this particular job.
Well, and you're a Fusion master. I mean, for me, a lot of the graphic stuff, I'm going to lean on Motion just because it's so quick and easy for me. But you're really good at Fusion, Tony. So it makes sense that you would, stick around for those jobs. I was just thinking about this. The other nice thing about coloring this in Final Cut, and why I wouldn't normally color other jobs, is a lot of this is also multicam and fairly simple setups. So coloring a multicam clip in Final Cut is kind of like grouping in Resolve, and that's one of the time-saving features in Resolve, is being able to group all of your clips for coloring. If this wasn't multicam like this, I probably wouldn't want to be coloring a 90-minute feature or whatever all in Final Cut.
Especially when you have all the different types of workflow for color features that Resolve has between the different types of shared nodes, the grouping, the power bins and galleries. But to your point earlier about Fusion, you're right about Fusion. It's like learning Final Cut 10. It's like trying to take an experienced Avid or Premiere editor and saying, here you go, work in Final Cut. They're going to scream and cry because it doesn't feel and work the same. And Fusion is the exact same way. But what's really cool about how Resolve 17, where they're pushing it, is basically you can do the same things now that you can with how you can build tools in Motion and bring over like behaviors and whatnot into Final Cut as effects and plugins. You can do the exact same thing. It's super simple now in Fusion and in Resolve. So like I've recreated Alex 4D's amazing grow shrink and his smooth motion. I've recreated my own version of that in one plugin in Resolve. And so those same things where you can have, a slight small push in or a movement, and you can have it start late or end early. You can do those exact same things inside of Resolve now. And as an editor, you don't even have to worry about going to Fusion, right? It's the same principle. So it's really interesting to see where Blackmagic is pushing Resolve, and I'm curious to see if that's going to catch on. But to me, that's kind of.
I had a question for you, Tony. Weren't there some improvements in 17 with Fusion as well that make like playback and things easier on the page? I remember some of the things that were frustrating me about Fusion was trying to figure out how to like retime or start a clip later, and I'm wondering if 17's improved some of those things. Of course, I'm a total Fusion page noob. I have read the book Art and Science of Digital Compositing. It's like 10 years old now, but it definitely breaks down how nodes work. It was written by the guy who was in charge of Shake. So I have an idea of how nodes work philosophically. I love nodes on the color page. But sometimes there's things where when you can take a layer on a timeline and nudge it around, in Motion or After Effects, it's easy to think that way. But then layers like this thing I just did in Motion, the layers actually were kind of breaking me because even though I was moving something back in Z space, it was on a layer above another thing, and it wouldn't go behind it. And those are things where nodes just kind of rule the day, in not having that same hierarchical order. Anyway, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of that. I know that Fusion might confuse a lot of people, but I think 17 made some improvements on that. Or
so you're talking about retiming clips, or just having layers in Fusion,
or just like I think the thing that was frustrating me was just trying to figure out how to start a clip later or there was just some little things like that I was like, how do I do this? And I had to like freeze frame it, and I had to and then use an opacity thing to bring it up. Anyway, I don't know.
It you know, in the thing about being in nodes is that it's like working non-linearly. You know, like you said, you can have something that begins and it can be the thing that ends and begins at the same time, versus when you're in layers, it's very linear, right? You have a stack like in Motion or After Effects. The playhead's going to see from the top to bottom, so it's got to go through each layer very linearly. And in nodes, you can break that, right? It's independent of that. So that is kind of confusing. And it takes a little while of being on that tricycle to realize, like, okay. It's like the same thing with people, with editors being concerned about losing time in Final Cut 10, right? Well, if I move something because of the magnetic timeline, I'm going to lose all my timing and it's going to change. Well, you're not really. We don't really have to worry about that, but you think you are. And it's the same principle with nodes. Fusion is time independent and resolution independent. So you can have anything start and end anywhere in time. You don't have to worry about setting up a comp in like in After Effects where you give it a range of time. So that's what could be confusing. There is they call it a keyframe editor, but basically that's where you have all your layers, and you have it's the most familiar look of seeing a stack of layers, and you can move your layers to start and end whenever you want to, and you can drag those, you know, in the GUI just like you would in After Effects and move your layers in time. But the power of nodes is that you can do that simultaneously. You can have one, I'll call it a layer or a piece of clip, start at the beginning, but also restart it or delay it later on as well. That makes sense. So it's kind of confusing. Like that's where the confusion comes into place. Is like I can have one media clip started and I don't have to duplicate it. Like in the layers application, I have to duplicate this clip, bring it in, and tell this one's going to start 10 seconds later. Versus in Fusion, because it's time independent, you just need one, and then you can just branch off and have another branch start whenever it wants to start. So that's kind of the idea, is that you can have one media clip starting at the beginning of my comp, and then I just take a branch, another node, and say delay this time. And now that's a whole new piece of media I can add in at 10 seconds later.
That's the word I was looking for, the delay time thing.
That's pretty powerful.
But, you can... Well, I'll tell you where it really helps is like just something simple like a Gaussian blur. Rather than having to copy and duplicate that across every stupid layer, you just have one, and then you're able to like process all the nodes through that one.
All the nodes together.
Through that one effect, which saves a lot of computing time too.
It's like Quartz Composer.
Yeah, it is linear in the sense that you do have a pipeline that goes from either left to right or top to bottom. Everything's got to flow through, and so you can add a blur at the beginning or at the end, and it's going to change whatever you have added to it. But just like you just said, you could still branch that blur off to something else and bring it back in.
That's interesting.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's hard to explain without showing.
I know, without actually demoing. One of the things I want to say about Blackmagic, they have incredible free training. All the tutorials they have, the PDF books, manuals, and stuff. I'm kind of surprised that Apple doesn't do that.
I think Tony's. It was really funny. A friend of mine was like, this training on Fusion, like it was a simple thing. I don't know, you're putting like a robot on stage or something. This one's really good, and I'm like, oh, that's my friend Tony. that was a couple years ago, but
a couple years ago, yeah, they have some good videos, like some of those where there's like an hour long and that kind of walks you through the basics. But they also have good documentation as well. Like there's a Resolve editing book, there's a Fusion book as well that you can see my name on there. It kind of walks you through. It walks you through like the process, like a step, so you can actually open up the software and then do that step by step. Plus, if you seek out Blackmagic as well, they have lots of Zoom educational series going on all the time, where you can jump on a class virtually and take a 3-day course or a week course and get certified. It's free and open to anybody. So
wow.
do those.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I mean, Apple's dropped their pro training for Final Cut and Motion, and they had. Here's a weird thing. Okay, Logic 10.5 came out in the middle of May. Apple said in June they were stopping their pro training. Then there was a Logic Pro 10.5 book that was supposed to be out in September, and then 10.6 came out in November. They're all over the place, ping-ponging. What's going on with the training? So anyway, Blackmagic, I have to give them kudos for their training and stuff. I didn't know those courses were free. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I've done like 3 or 4 courses, just me, and that's just for Fusion.
And to be clear, Blackmagic actually pays you for that as well.
For the training.
So the people we can get it for free, but Blackmagic is actually footing the bill to have excellent trainers like yourself come and teach us.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Which is awesome. There's a lot to love about Blackmagic for sure.
Absolutely.
And they're not wimpy courses either. They're a lot of good time and effort goes into creating the ability for you to learn and grasp these concepts. So yeah. Cool.
Boy, if you're just starting out nowadays, you got a killer 1-2 punch with Final Cut Pro and Resolve. I mean, if you're a young editor, you learn those two, the world is really yours between those two. You know?
Yeah. Yep. And,
so the Adobe suite, educate, like you're talking about, Richard, about Apple kind of not having enough support of sorts, but then you have the Adobe suite in the education space where they make it, really enticing to do that.
Yes.
And although, Apple does have the Pro bundle, educational pricing, $199 for their app, you never get this impression that they're really kind of pushing into that space, And so a lot of schools, they go for the Adobe license because they get, Photoshop and After Effects and the Premiere.
Exactly.
So the students learn Premiere, and like a lot of people, they want to stay with what they know. And some people will download the Resolve because it's free, and Final Cut might get an honorable mention unless you have a teacher like myself who really says, "Hey, let's try to use this."
Well, when the students get out of school though, and they realize that Adobe is going to charge them for the rest of their life. Yes. Or the software stops working. It isn't like you buy a version and you're stuck at this version. The rest of your life, you have to pay, or they pull the plug on your software on your computer. That's what I don't like about the Adobe model. I understand that Photoshop is necessary in schools and colleges. That's how they get their foot in the door. But I wouldn't, I used Photoshop back in the days, and I used Premiere on the Mac before Final Cut came out. But once they started that subscription, and it's not even a usual subscription. It's the one that pulls the plug on your existing software. That's what kills me.
I use Pixelmator. I've replaced a lot of Photoshop.
I have that too.
Pixelmator.
I do too. I have Pixelmator Pro.
Got Affinity, Sarah.
Yeah.
But to speak about education, like you look at, we want Apple to really jump in and start pushing. But in the meantime, if you look at Sam Messman and what he's doing with young kids,
and iPhones,
and doing, looking at it from the mobile filmmaking aspect, I think that's just phenomenal and great.
Absolutely is.
Of course, they're using Final Cut, and they're using the iPhones.
Yes, and I think that's the Trojan horse method. I think
that certainly is.
Apple has. See, that's why maybe Apple doesn't really have to push, because kind of how years ago, remember when the first iPhone came out, and the idea, and for that matter, to that end, even Macs for that matter, but into the IT space, and now you have a lot of IT departments that still wanting to use Apple for products for a lot of reasons. I can't help but wonder, like what you're talking about, Tony, is you've got Macs at schools, you've got iPhones, a lot of they're using the Apple tools that are on there, and they want kind of this cohesion between the hardware and the software, so that is to Apple's benefit as well.
Yep.
I don't think it's a secret that Sam also does a lot of those iPhone mobile filmmaking things in conjunction with Apple.
Right.
So if you look at the past ones he's done, so that's definitely been on the radar. I think there could be a lot more done in the education space, especially for pros. There was a shift, and we go back in time in that 2007 time period when Phil Schiller got put in charge of all the worldwide marketing. There was kind of a shift where Apple became more unified in their presentation and the company. It all came from the top, because before that there was a lot more people, trainers and salespeople that were specifically for the pro market. And that sort of disappeared in this shift to unify. Sorry, I have a kid knocking at my door.
He's hungry.
It's one of them. Anyway, I would like, now that Phil Schiller's kind of being put out to pasture, so to speak, I'd be interested to see if Apple's able to, shift more attention back on pros. Similar to, after Steve Jobs' passing, I saw a change in the way and who was allowed to present at Apple events. I'm going to figure this out real quick.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've done everything. We're going to go ahead and finish up here, but certainly I want to say happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Same to you all.
Thanksgiving.
Same to you all.
I want to see what her name is.
It's funny watching Brad, because I'm thinking about, while I'm on with you guys, I'm texting my wife and tell my daughter she's being too loud.
There you go.
Right here in the background.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having us on, Rich. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tony. I'm glad you can make it on. You're my main guy for resolve questions. You and Mark Bach, when it comes to color grading, he's great with that as well. And,
Tony, you're inspiring me to jump in a little bit more, and I kind of stay out of the Fusion area, but I think I need to spend more time in there. But it sounds like it's a lot more in like Quartz Composer, very much kind of like doing that. Very node based.
Reach out anytime. I'm on Twitter, and reach out anytime.
Absolutely.
There.
This is interesting. I'm trying to mute the microphone, but it automatically unmutes when it detects audio. So that's fun.
That's interesting.
This is Isabella. She's grumpy for some reason. So
Isabella, you can't be grumpy. It's Thanksgiving. It's Turkey Day tomorrow.
You shouldn't be grumpy. So anyway, good time to go. We're saying bye. Can you say bye? It's a nice stinker face. All right.
Thanks, everyone. Brad.
Thank you, Richard.
Everybody. Isabella. Tangier. Tony. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving, and I will talk to you post-Thanksgiving.
Cheers.
Right?
All right.
Talk to you later. Thanks a lot.